On Monday, in reporting in Austria, we learned of a US plan to split up the European Union, carving off four member states, Italy, Hungary, Poland, and Austria, to form its own Trumpist bloc. If we look at a map, we can quickly see this is a plan to bisect Europe east and west. And if we add in the fact that Donald Trump seems to think he will have a puppet state in western Ukraine, and the governance of Robert Fico in Slovakia, the pro-Putin, pro-Orban, pro-Trump leader, we can also see this starts splitting the continent not just east and west, but north and south as well, and completely isolates the Baltic states from the other NATO allies and the European Union as a whole. The existing published version of the National Security Strategy refers to the European Union as an adversarial relationship with the United States, and that the US will try to degrade the ability for transnational organizations to exist. And while there's been much talk about this referring directly to the European Union, it also is attacking other aspects of European transnational government and transnational government in other regions of the earth, which do exist that people often do not think about. One of these is the Council of Europe and its very important European Convention on Human Rights. The European Convention of Human Rights is one of the greatest things that Europe has ever done. It is a powerful suite of rights and liberties that are granted to every single person on this continent, and creates limitations on what governments are able to legally do against their people. This is something that is vital to understand, in that Europe faced what happens when you allow governments to do anything in the fires of World War I and in World War II. And there was a treaty drawn up, this convention, to prevent those things from being able to happen again. And right now, unfortunately, we have world leaders in Europe, 27 as of yesterday, signing on board the idea of destroying the human rights law as is and reforming it to protect their right to abuse human rights. And unfortunately, this effort is being led by Giorgia Meloni, the far-right Prime Minister of Italy, and of course, the supposedly center-left leader of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, and the supposedly center-left and also human rights lawyer, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the UK. Specifically, they want to go after the sections protecting your rights to the family, and also your right to be protected from torture and slavery. And while Keir Starmer said repeatedly that this was to stop the far right, he had Viktor Orban and Giorgia Meloni and Robert Fico sign on to his plan to get rid of human rights law. Funny how that works, so Keir? Now, this all loops back to the fact that Keir Starmer spent a lot of the last 18 months, along with Giorgia Meloni, building up alternative forums to the existing normal channels of the European Union and NATO and other such institutions, instead putting together ad hoc coalitions of the willing to work outside of those frameworks. And it makes a lot more sense when you start thinking, did Keir Starmer know Donald Trump wanted to break up NATO and to break up the European Union? Because Keir Starmer was courting Donald Trump not just at the beginning of his presidency, but many, many months before the election, and was sending over a lot of his people from labor to build up relationships with Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and other MAGA leaders. At the same time, Keir Starmer was waging his domestic war against migrants, refugees, trans people, the disabled, and anyone who is taking any form of welfare, coupled with his extreme support of the Israeli government in their war in Gaza, which caused a genocide. And in Europe, he is not trying to figure out a way forward after Brexit, but instead campaigned upon making Brexit work, and has avoided any attempts to try to return to more normal relations with the European Union by his own self-imposed red lines. Likewise, he has built much stronger relationships over now many years with Giorgia Meloni and her own far-right party, even sending his last Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, to their fascist far-right youth conference, Atreyu Festival, named after literally the fantasy character from The Neverending Story. And now on Wednesday of the following week, we still only see glowing remarks about Donald Trump from Keir Starmer's government, even after Donald Trump directly insulted the City of London and the Labour Party mayor there, Sadiq Khan. Even more bizarre, we see Yvette Cooper, their foreign secretary, saying that the UK will engage in illegal pushbacks when directly asked about it, and that she would support the ideas of Jordan Bardella, the far-right leader of Rassemblement National, or Marine Le Pen's party. Which leads me to the conclusion that Keir Starmer must have been aware on some level about Donald Trump's plans. He has been aligning the UK into a situation that it can benefit from the Trump realignment of Europe. And this means he's also helping to accelerate some of that destruction by being unengaging with the European Union within its own structures and trying to do things outside of it, and likewise NATO by doing the same. This is also coupled with his actions in the Council of Europe trying to dismantle the Human Rights Convention. And this is deeply, deeply worrying because it effectively means that Donald Trump has effectively control over the UK Prime Minister, who is doing his bidding in helping to destabilize Europe for all of us. Now, some final pieces to help you understand this Labour puzzle. Keir Starmer is a conservative leading a center-left party that center-left party, because it has a very, very broad tent of people, includes incredibly social reactionary people, like the current dominant ideological figure in the Labour Party, Maurice Glassman, who describes himself as the left side of MAGA Square. Yeah, Glassman's faction is known as Blue Labour. It is a social reactionary group within the Labour Party. They're joined by the Labour right. They're kind of neo-Blairite kind of figures. Super, super right-wing, war on terror, closer to a neocon than any sort of leftist. And while the Labour Party does have other factions, like the left or the far left or the soft left, none of those have any power right now and have been effectively purged out of any position within the Labour Party. And that is a major problem. This gets worse when you know that Keir Starmer's people have been changing the internal Labour Party rules to make it much harder for them to lose their current power that they have. And you have to understand, Keir is incredibly, incredibly unpopular, like way more unpopular than Liz Truss. And unfortunately, that means Blue Labour and the Labour right are already looking for a person to replace him. And it seems they're all looking at Shabana Mahmood, who is a social reactionary from the Blue Labour group and is currently the Home Secretary doing Keir Starmer's mass deportation plans. She even got a nod of approval today, a few hours ago, by Tony Blair. Take in your head, Americans, that she's effectively our Kristi Noem. And while all this other stuff is happening, there is a big, powerful, and well-funded right-wing party in the UK led by Nigel Farage that continues to have more and more money from the right around the world flood into it, and effectively, because there are paper-thin rules around campaign finance outside of elections, yeah, well, Nigel Farage keeps growing. And it doesn't help that Keir Starmer is effectively doing Nigel Farage's policies for him, and every day in the media blames every problem on migrants and trans people. Now, I hope that makes things much more concrete. There are major problems in UK politics. There are major problems in European politics right now. And unfortunately, the threat of Trump and Putin hang over all of us. And this places many countries, especially in the Baltics, in an undesirable position. And places like Ukraine facing an oblivion and occupation by both Russia and the United States. Now, with that done, if you can donate, please do. We're trying to fundraise for next year's operations. It keeps the show going, and I mean that seriously.